which at that point was several days after landfall.
Right, and I'm sure people up in West Virginia and Pennsylvania and Virginia don't want to hear anything about Agnes.
Certainly not, especially places like the Wyoming Valley. Again, we want to show you the Doppler radar, and John, tell us a little bit about what you see here as Fran is on shore now in southeastern North Carolina.
Well, you can see that part of the eye is certainly on shore, and Jill obviously there at Bolivia was in the eye of the hurricane since you went down to calm, but it'll take the whole eye some time to pass all of it inland, but a portion of it is inland even as we speak.
Okay, that is roughly, that white dot is roughly where Jill Brown is. Now, granted, there may be a few mile deviation in the map over the grid map over the precipitation, or the precipitation over the grid map, so we're not talking about down to the foot here, but roughly speaking, that's where Jill Brown is. You can see the eye wall now spinning on shore and those heavier rain bands to the north.
Well, Jill Brown is at ground zero, and if she says she's in the eye and has calm winds, she is in the eye.
We're going to buy that and go with that. Now, also want to notice to the north that hurricane warnings extend as far as the North Carolina-Virginia border. But again, the real problems tonight are in New Hanover County and Brunswick County, and part of the story has been Wrightsville Beach. Our very own Jim Cantori is standing by there, John, right now, and again, with those winds there gusting over 100 miles an hour, we cannot broadcast live, but we can get Jim on the phone. Jim, we just talked to Jill Brown. She is in the eye wall. Fran, how about the weather there? Have you experienced the eye wall, or is it still storming?
You know, that's amazing. I'm probably about 6.5 to maybe 7 miles from where Jill is, and we are still getting hammered here. If anything, winds are perhaps a little bit more southerly at this point, but I mean, nothing has let up. The rain, the wind, the gusts. I mean, we haven't seen any kind of decrease in the wind here.
And the fact that the winds are from the south, what does that mean, John, as far as the storm and its track?
Well, the fact that Jim says the wind is still very strong there.
Space and get rid of some of this water. But as high tide came in today, it wasn't so bad, but it's almost like the tide never went back out. It never really went back out, and a lot of this is just overwash. Right here in the hotel, Mike, at this time, we are almost 180 degrees to 260 degrees surrounded by water. And
how about the winds themselves right now? You estimated gust earlier about 100 miles an hour. Is that basically where they stand right now, based on your estimation?
They may be a little less than that. I mean, it doesn't seem as ferocious as it was. I mean, the gustiness of the wind seems to be letting up a little bit, but it's still, no doubt, cranking a hurricane force. Okay, Jim, stay dry there. We'll keep you certainly in our thoughts, and we'll be back with you certainly in the next half an hour. That's Jim Cantori live on the phone because of the high winds there in Wrightsville Beach. We have the 9 o'clock update in. Let's pass it over to John. He can take a look at it as we, meanwhile, go to Jeff Morrow, the Weather Channel's Jeff Morrow, standing by live now, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Myrtle Beach, fortunately, getting off the hook this time, right, Jeff?
I'm sorry, Mike, could you repeat that question?
Sure, Jeff. I was saying that you're pretty much getting off the hook this time, getting off pretty easy compared to areas to your north and east.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks here breathing a sigh of relief, not that anybody's wishing any harm on anybody, the fact that it's going up through the Wilmington area once again this year. But the Grand Strand definitely, they're happy here that the storm missed this area, and kind of a double good deal here was that the wind was offshore. With the hurricane tracking to the east, of course, we being on the western side of it, had more of a northerly wind component for much of the day, and then it switched to northwest, and it has stayed that way all day, even during the time of high tide when the surf was the highest. So we had the surf come up to about the dune line here, and there isn't much of one, but it never really did overwash, and we haven't had any reports of any overwash. That usually is the biggest fear with a hurricane, is the water, and we really have not had a problem with that. We've had plenty of rain. Winds finally starting to back off here a little bit, Mike, and it looks like hopefully we might be able to get a live shot, a television shot to you here before too long, hopefully in the next hour.
And Jeff, you mentioned earlier just a bit of damage so far you've seen.
Yeah, just a little bit of damage. What we are seeing is a lot of transformers blowing out, I guess under the tremendous wind pressure. I mean, we had the windows actually blown out in our van here not too long ago, about an hour or two ago, but the transformers are going, and when they go at night here, it's a tremendous blue flash that you see. Fortunately, the power in our hotel is still on, but I'm afraid some areas of Myrtle Beach have lost power tonight.
Okay, Jeff, we'll be certainly back in touch with you throughout this evening. Jeff Moore live from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. One spot which is getting off pretty easy along with Charleston because of the winds blowing offshore. John, what is the latest from the Hurricane Center? This is our 9 o'clock update.
Okay, we have the 9 o'clock update, and the center of the hurricane, Fran, was located at that time at 33.9, 78.0, or that is near Southport in North Carolina. I just looked at the map there, and that's about perhaps 10 miles from where Jill Brown is, so the eye is there too. So the eye has come ashore, so we can definitely state at this time that the eye of Hurricane Fran has come ashore in North Carolina.
Okay, and Jill Brown, we joined her at the top of the hour in the eye of Hurricane Fran. I don't know if we've ever seen this live on television, but it's happening tonight. Jill Brown, we go back to you in Bolivia, North Carolina. Jill, what's the latest on Fran?
Well, John and Mike, no real change since last time we talked to you. A little bit of drizzle coming down. Things are nice and calm here. My producer, Tim Witt, and our truck operator outside, they keep telling me a lot of birds flying around through here, and it's definitely warm. We're ready to take our jackets off again. It's that warm and humid, sticky center of the hurricane for sure.
Mike, I don't think this is quite a first. I think Jill was in the eye of Hurricane Aaron last year. Isn't that right, Jill?
Yes, that is right.
Okay, Jill, I apologize. I knew you were on the phone, but I wasn't sure if we were able to broadcast from the eye of Aaron.
Maybe we did. Did we broadcast live?
We did broadcast from the eye of Aaron. It was during the day.
Yeah, that's right. I remember we did.
Okay, I stand corrected. The second time here at the Weather Channel. Jill, what about the people around there? Are they kind of, is there a sense of jubilation or excitement? Because this is something that probably only happens once in a lifetime, if that.
Yeah, that is true. Everybody opened the doors. They're going outside, looking around to see what it's like to be in the eye, kind of wandering around there, letting the dogs come out, and they have a few of them around here, a few people hovering about. And I suspect as it starts coming in quickly, everyone's going to be running for cover. We're going to have to bring down the garage doors again because the garage doors face north and south. And so the wind really howls through there, and we got a chance to open them. They stopped rattling for a little while. That was our real first indication. All of a sudden we were in the eyes. It got so quiet inside. And outside, as John, you told me, we should be able to hear the roar as it starts coming in again. We're not hearing anything yet. And again, it's just drizzling lightly, and the winds haven't picked up at all yet.
And the birds, and you mentioned earlier, or I saw a bird earlier mentioned just a minute ago about the birds flying around, and John Hope has certainly mentioned that is often the case because the birds try to stay in safe haven and they just follow that eye on shore.
That's right. It looks like they're definitely following it right over Bolivia and Brunswick County.
I've seen pictures of down in the Caribbean on a ship during the hurricane, and the ship was literally just loaded with birds. There was a bird perched every place a bird could get on the ship in the eye of a hurricane.
Really? Jill Brown, we want you to stand by there. We're going to be checking back with you certainly in the next 10 to 15 minutes, and maybe by that time you may start to hear the roar as the other end of the eye approaches her and she gets back into those gusty and very strong hurricane force winds from the opposite direction, from the south and southeast.
Now watch out that you're sheltered there. Remember, the wind will be the opposite direction.
I was just thinking that we're probably going to have to switch to the other side of the building, so we'll have to start thinking about that. We might have to do it pretty quickly.
I think you want to do that.
Okay, Jill, stay safe there. We'll be back with you in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Jill Brown in the eye of Hurricane Fran. And that is the second time we have broadcasted live from a Hurricane Aaron last year and Fran this year. And we will be back with Jill in the next 10 minutes, about 9:30 Eastern. I want to get you updated now on the other part of the story, now that the Fran is making a run at Wilmington, North Carolina, and certainly the Brunswick County area, that a tornado watch is up for a good deal of eastern North Carolina and northeastern South Carolina. And as John has mentioned, the highest threat area with those tornadoes comes once the hurricane makes landfall.
Once it makes landfall, that's when we have to watch out. We rarely see tornadoes as the hurricane is approaching, but after the eye comes in, that is when we begin to see them, if they're going to occur. We hope they don't occur at all.
But most tornadoes with a hurricane are usually F0 or F1 on the Fujita scale. Another scale we talk about with severe weather from 0 to 5, 5 being the strongest, but an F0, F1 is a tornado not compared to the major ones we see in the plains in Tornado Alley.
Once in a great while you get a stronger one, but for the most part they're not.
So watch out for that. And also the rainfall. We've got the Doppler radar estimate loaded up. Let's show you that right now. And this is incredibly impressive, John. Now, this is an estimate. Granted, this isn't exact, but Doppler radar, what a great tool we have now in the 90s to show you this tool here. And it's adding up the rainfall. You can see how the rainfall, John, and those of you at home, is adding up off to the north of the center, or the eye of Hurricane Fran. And see these pink colors? By the way, offshore, you can't read the number over here, but I'll tell you, that pink area, that brighter area just offshore south of Myrtle Beach, 14.5 inches.
Well, again, Mike, I want to remind everybody that tomorrow, the eye of this hurricane will be ashore, the seas will be subsiding, the tides will be going down, but the rainfall then, I'm afraid, is going to be the big problem, and that's going to spread northward, and it's going to spread up into the mountainous states, and does certainly create a potential for some flooding.
And John, already in southwestern parts of Brunswick County, that circled area, based on the scale, an estimated 10 to 12 inches of rain around the Longwood and Seaside area and over towards Thomasboro. These are towns just east and northeast of North Myrtle Beach along Highway 17. So those coastal areas, John, have already been clobbered. And with more rain coming in, some of these totals may add up to 15 to 16 inches of rainfall.
And again, we remind the folks that these are estimates. We'll have to see what the measured amounts
the official reports are in the morning.
Turn out to be.
Many amateur weather prognosticators out there with rain gauges. We want to go back now to Jim Cantora. He's standing by live in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. Jim is on the phone. Jim, any update now in the past 10 minutes? Are you still getting the strong winds, or have you experienced the eye of Fran?
Yes, Mike, we are here. As a matter of fact, there's some real interesting happenings here in the last 10 minutes or so. The overwash is so bad from this bay here that some of the sailboats, some of the smaller sailboats, are actually beginning to wash down the street in front of this hotel. I mean, these are, smaller craft boats. Already we saw some of the barricades that the police had that were heading back over toward Wrightsville Beach. These boats are coming back from the waterfront.
And what about the damage around the hotel? Have you seen any flying debris over the past half an hour or so as those winds have been gusting over hurricane force?
Most of the damage was a little bit earlier on, probably about an hour ago, where we had some pretty powerful limbs snapped off, a lot of leaves, and there's a tremendous smell of pine in the air. I don't know where that's coming from. Perhaps, the pine trees are the limbs that are snapping at the present time.
We got the light out there?
We're just kind of getting some new information on this, but I mean, I can look out the window. There's a police cruiser right across the hotel here. He's above the water. He's on the bridge, but he's got his lights shining on these boats. There's several of them that are just kind of sitting there against the road.
So these boats have sounds like have been torn away from their moorings and have been beached against the bridge. Is that what it sounds like there?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Or they don't look like they're against the bridge. They're kind of away from the bridge, over almost toward the road here.
Are these sailboats or are these big cruise liners? I don't mean the time you take a cruise on, but the big vessels 40 or 50 feet.
No, these look like about 20 feet, probably 25 feet.
Well, Jim, is the water lapping around around your building?
Okay. Yeah, John, it continues to come up. As a matter of fact, the truck is probably about 20 feet from the building, and the edge of the water is now up to the truck.
Well, do you think your truck is going to get inundated?
Well, I don't know, John. I'm kind of waiting for it to go down a little bit. We just continue to get these winds. They're not as strong as they were, but certainly still at hurricane force.
And they're not letting up at all. I think that you might not get in the eye wall there if that's the case. If your wind is already south and it comes around the southwest, that will mean that the eye will have passed to the west of where you are.
Well, it'd be nice if we got into that eye, certainly, but you think when these winds shift around maybe a little bit more toward the northwest that some of this overwash will stop?
It won't stop until the wind comes all the way around to the west.
Okay. Well, maybe at that point then we'll stop seeing this water rise, but until then, I mean, we've seen boats from their moorings. The water continues to rise around this hotel, and it's probably not too safe to drive in the street in front of us.
Don't forget, you're east of the eye of the hurricane, and you're in that area where the storm surge is going to be the highest. So what's happening now is the eye of the hurricane is coming ashore, and you're getting the maximum storm surge that will be associated with this hurricane right now.
Well, John, we are a mile inland. I can't imagine what it's like on some of those roads out toward the beach right now.
Well, you'll get a chance to see tomorrow, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe we will, but, even with Bertha, there were reports of water that were 2 to 4 feet high the day after Bertha. So, I mean, I can't imagine what this has done.
Okay, Jim Cantore live from Wrightsville Beach, and just a little historical information. The last time Wilmington was hit directly by a hurricane, you'll probably remember this one, Hazel, back in 1954. That came in as a Category 4.
That was an October hurricane. That was a very devastating hurricane. It was certainly the most devastating one that ever hit North Carolina prior to Hurricane Hugo of 1989.
So we're dealing with a Category 3 tonight, Hurricane Fran, sustained winds of 115 miles an hour. You're watching the Weather Channel. We're continuing our live coverage. We've got Jill Brown in the eye of Hurricane Fran right now. We're going to try to go back to her in a few minutes. Also updating us, you just heard Jim Cantore from Wrightsville Beach in New Hanover County. And in Brunswick County, it's Jill Brown. And Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Jeff Morrow has been on the phone too. We're not able to go and get video from Jeff and Jim because of the seriousness of the situation. In fact, we just heard that Jim's live truck is in certainly some danger there of the water coming right up.
Well, I hope it doesn't get up there, but it's already lapping up around the truck, and I doubt if the tide is as high now there as it's going to be.
And certainly with the eye still right there near the coast and the winds coming in, we often talk about along and to the right of where the eye makes landfall. That's where you have the highest storm surge, because you not only have the wind whipping around. You notice the circulation. Let me show you here with the telestrator, or I can't telestrate it, but notice how the clouds are rolling around and whipping around, and they're circulating around this Hurricane Fran, and they're rotating counterclockwise. So you got the movement of the storm, and you add that component to the wind blowing on shore, so it's kind of like A plus B. And in the opposite sense, down around Myrtle Beach, over towards the left of your screen, we've got the winds blowing offshore, so it's like A minus B. So that's why we have, it's like a double whammy situation, and that's why the storm surge is always worse around Wrightsville Beach. That's where Jim Cantore is. Now, the eye of Hurricane Fran has made landfall over the past half an hour. We've been talking to Jill Brown. She has certainly been in the thick of it. Earlier, she was in the building, and they have metal doors on the north side and the south side of this building in Bolivia, North Carolina. That's just down the road on 17 from Wilmington. And she was telling us that these doors were rattling because of the strong winds, and then all of a sudden the wind went away and everybody went outside. Birds flying around, which is, as you mentioned, very common in the eye of a hurricane.
It is. At first, I guess they were suspicious that it might just be a lull, but then they finally decided they were in the eye.
Certainly with the rain shutting off, and they are not able to see any breaks in the overcast. Of course, it is dark out, and with the light around the area, sometimes it's hard to see clearing. We're going to try to go back to Jill Brown here momentarily. I believe we can right now. Jill is now live again in the eye of Hurricane Fran. Jill, we talked to you about 10 minutes ago. What is the latest right now? Are the winds still calm, or have you been hit by the other side?
No, Mike and John, it's still nice and calm here. We're in Bolivia and Brunswick County. Now, we're at the Emergency Operations Center for the county, and I wanted to show you our setup here, because again, we were on the south side, right out here a few minutes ago. I'm in the garage now, and this is the north side. These garage doors in here, they're saying, will withstand about 120 mile-per-hour wind. So they lifted them a little bit to kind of let the air go through because they were rattling so loud. It was when they stopped rattling that we realized we're in the eye, went outside, looked around, and it's nice and quiet now. There's a little drizzle. We can see a few birds from time to time fly by, and interestingly enough, the lights are on still here, so I don't even think we've lost power, although much of the county has. And they're reporting a lot of tree damage around here, but so far that's about it.
Have you gotten any reports from the coastal areas? Because obviously some of those coastal areas over around Southport and Cape Fear are really getting hammered right now.
Well, we've had an unconfirmed report around Thompson Beach of some severe damage to the fire and police police department building. So again, unconfirmed, but that's the belief right now that there's some problems there. What one of the police officers here, one of the EMS people was telling me that they think maybe we don't have quite as many trees down right around here because Bertha came through and knocked a lot of them down. So maybe some of the weaker trees went out, and the stronger trees, the more limber trees, made it through yet again.
Well, with all that rain that has fallen today, Jill, some areas just south and west of you, we were showing the Doppler radar estimate just a few minutes ago. John and I were looking at it, and Doppler radar estimates right now are showing up to a foot of rainfall so far, and even if that's overdone by 20%, we're still talking about 10 inches of rain. The ground is saturated, and we're showing, Jill, right now, the viewers at home, the radar, and with all this wet ground, that is just, boy, that is a perfect prescription with strong winds to get trees uprooted over power lines, and as we saw here in Atlanta from Opal, power can be out for days and days, although the power crew crews, honestly work as hard as they can.
Mike.
Go ahead, Jill.
I can hear that wind, I think, starting to come back in. Mike, are you hearing that? I think we're starting to hear maybe the beginning of that roar. So the eye wall may be coming back towards us.
I can't hear it in my ear. Jill, I can't hear it in my ear, but maybe the viewers have a better sense of it at home. Jill?
Shortly,
John?
you might
So how long, Jill, have you been in the eye up to this point?
At this point, it has been about 40 minutes, I would say. 35, 40 minutes.
35, 40 minutes.
Okay, Jill.
So we pretty much stood right across the center, perhaps.
And you are going to the other side of the building?
We have not gone to the other side of the building. Again, we're wide open. We're going to have to go up to the other side over here in a few minutes as those winds start kicking in again. Still very calm. I'm looking out there. It almost looks like no rain. Maybe a little spits here and there.
So, Jill, right now you are facing south.
That's correct.
So the wind should be coming right in at you in the next few minutes if that roar
Pretty
increases.
soon they'll start coming in this way. So now we're hearing it.
I can hear something in the background. I think we want to stay with this because this should be pretty amazing television if we can get the sound out to the viewers and certainly the winds picking up as they whip on through. Once again, recapping, Jill standing in a fire station there. You can see the big doors behind her are open, and in front of her, in back of our camera and our photographer, the doors are also open, and now that the eye wall is coming on the back side of the eye, we're getting the other side of the eye wall, the winds will be coming in from the other side, from the south and southeast, and that should be very visible here in just a few minutes.
You still hear it, Jill?
I'm still here, yes. What is it, John?
Could you still hear the wind
can I still
coming
hear
back?
I can hear it. I'm hearing a little bit of a howl. What we might have to do as it starts picking up is close up here and move over because it's going to start blowing the lights over and blowing us around. And of course we'll be in danger of some flying debris on this side. We don't have the building to block us at this point like we did earlier.
Okay, Jill, for safety reasons, we don't want to put you and the crew in harm's way. We want to get you a chance to move your crew and move yourself into a safer position, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as you get set back up. That's Jill Brown. She's reporting live tonight from the eye of Hurricane Fran in Bolivia, North Carolina. That's southwest of Wilmington. She's been in the eye for 35 or 40 minutes, she mentioned?
About 40 minutes, she said.
She's been live for about 40 minutes. We're once again looking at the radar, and you can see the showers and thunderstorms continuing to really wrap around the northern fringe of the eye, in fact, around Wilmington and north and west of Wilmington, up 74, Highway 74 and 76, now into Columbus and Pender County. You are likely getting some of the worst weather you're going to see because that area right around the center where you see those bright colors, those reds and oranges, that is where you have the strongest winds. Meanwhile, the eye, as it makes landfall, as we showed you with Jill, the winds go away, the rain basically stops, the skies will clear, and as we saw briefly, we saw at least one bird in the picture, but they're reporting, our producer Tim Witt and Jill, the folks there reporting birds flying around, and John has explained, obviously, if you're a bird, you want to be in the area where there's no wind.
Well, the birds can't handle the eye wall of the hurricane. That's the hardest part of the hurricane, and they'd be blown to bits. But somehow or other, I'm not sure whether it's instinct or what it is, but they manage to get into the eye and go along with the hurricane.
Well, we just got word from Wilmington, North Carolina, that the winds there have shifted to the east-southeast, and they're now 35 knots, gusting to 56 knots. Now, earlier we had gusts over 80 knots. What can you tell us about the movement there of Fran and the eye wall?
Well, it sounds as if they're going around the east-southeast, they might be just on the very edge of the eye wall there with most of the eye off to the west.
Okay, I want to get Matt Crowther, our senior forecaster, to load in the radar out here so we can do some telestrating and give the viewers at home an idea where the eye wall is, those heavier rain bands, and John and I can kind of discuss what's going on as Fran has made landfall. Once again, you're watching the Weather Channel as we continue our Hurricane Fran coverage. We've got Jeff Morrow at Myrtle Beach. Jill Brown is in the eye of Hurricane Fran. We've been talking to her for about the past 40 minutes. We're going to go back to her in just a moment. What she is doing now is moving into a safer area. She's already hearing the roar of the wind from the back side of the eye wall, and once that moves back at her, she's going to be clobbered with heavy rain and wind. And Jim Cantori, has also been following the storm from Wrightsville Beach. The problem there is too much wind. The satellite truck is in the water, not totally in the water, but the water is lapping up to the truck. But the wind has precluded us from broadcasting, at least video-wise, from there. We're going to have Jim on the phone in just a minute. Back to Fran. Let's go back to the radar. I can show you what's going on here. And you can see, John, that the eye is now coming on around the Cape Fear area. And it looks like, unless the grid is a little off here, that You think Jim Cantori in Wrightsville Beach may just get on the fringe of this eye wall?
Well, he may not quite do it. It says the wind is still south, and it's east-southeast of Wilmington. He may never get in the eye.
And as I mentioned before, these areas here are just getting pounded all the way back into Horry County in South Carolina. Heavy rainfalls wrapping around all the way back to Conway, and still some pretty good rains around Myrtle Beach, but obviously the heavier rains now falling in North Carolina across Columbus and Pender County. If you're watching tonight from around Elizabethtown or Whiteville or East Arcadia, you know what we're talking about. That is hopefully if you still got your power and your cable. Now up the coast in the sound areas, John, we're talking about an onshore wind here. How about the flooding over here and some of the sounds on the west side of the sounds?
Well, we're a little bit concerned about that, as you might imagine, because the wind is strong up there. It's from the east, and it could push the sound water back to the west and up some of those rivers. That even happened in Bertha, and I'm afraid it's going to happen again here.
Well, yesterday they evacuated Ocracoke Island at 5. That was a mandatory evacuation because of the low-lying area and the road gets covered over with water. It doesn't take much in that particular location.
Mike, if you take a close look at that eye there, I think you'll see that out over the water, the sky is basically clear. Now, back there in the portion where Jill is, those are evidently some low clouds with a little drizzle, and even though that doesn't appear clear, wind-wise, that is in the eye of the hurricane.
Jill is right about there.
Right there. That's why she can't see any stars or anything, because there are still some clouds there.
And we want to emphasize the Doppler radar is very sensitive, so even though you're seeing some green there where Jill is, that doesn't necessarily mean it's raining.
Right.
So once again, Hurricane Fran, the eye walls on shore. We're going to be going back to Jill Brown momentarily. She's repositioning herself, a safer position in Bolivia, North Carolina and Brunswick County. Also, Jim Cantori joins us on the phone. We're going to try to go to Jim right now and see if he is available. Jim is on the phone from Wrightsville Beach. Not ready? Not quite ready with Jim Cantori. We'll get back to him. Let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen once Fran continues to make its move onshore and that heavy rainfall. We're seeing it now near the beaches, but it could be a very, very serious problem in the Appalachians where the ground is already saturated.
Well, in the first place, as it gets inland, Fran will weaken and weaken rapidly. As a matter of fact, on this last advisory at 9 o'clock, the top winds were down to 105 miles an hour, and they will diminish, but they won't diminish quickly enough. But what we expect to see some hurricane-force winds in gusts extending about, say 100 miles inland. By the time the hurricane gets inland as much as 100 miles, I think we'll be down to a tropical storm. But the rainfall that's associated with it is not going to stop. And even after it gets down to a tropical storm or even a depression, we still expect to see very heavy rains in the mountainous areas of North Carolina and Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, and perhaps up into Pennsylvania as well.
Well, let's make that comparison to as far as Hurricane Hugo and last year Hurricane Opal. They were both moving much faster, and I think that's why Atlanta and Charlotte, Atlanta with Opal and Charlotte with Hugo, got those hurricane-force wind gusts. But tonight we're seeing Fran moving slowly, so that's going to save a lot of people from maybe some destructive winds?
Yes, it will, because the winds won't extend as far inland as they did either in Hugo or in Opal. But the downside of all this is that the fact that it moves slowly is going to give the rain more of a chance to be prolonged.
And as I mentioned earlier, some areas have already had just a load of rainfall in the Appalachians. Even in those areas of eastern North Carolina yesterday, 4 to 6 inches of rain, and you throw on another foot of rainfall, and that means the flooding is very likely. We have flash flood watches out, and the story into the weekend will be the mountains of western North Carolina and West Virginia, because the track right now is projected to take what's left of Fran into West Virginia. Now that could change, but that is the track now from the National Hurricane Center.
Right. That looks pretty good to me. I think it'll move certainly in that general direction.
Let's go back to the radar and show you what's going on from the, well, there's the big blue planet, and we can really show you on here, just give you an idea, because we have something else going on. Let's keep that up right now because we have something else going on. John, while we're waiting to get Jill and Jim back here with us live, let's take a look at what's going on out over the Atlantic, because we have a new tropical depression, and that is certainly something else we've been watching very closely today for our viewers out in the Caribbean.
That is a tropical depression, and it's forecast to actually be a tropical storm, but looking at it tonight, I don't see that it's getting organized very rapidly, so perhaps we have a little time to watch it still.
But you know, you look at this, you're looking at the entire western hemisphere, and your eye immediately goes right in on Hurricane Fran right there, taking up a good chunk of territory north of the equator.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, let's come back here to the show, here to the set, and let's talk a little bit more about Fran. We're trying to get Jim Cantori on the phone, and as soon as we hear from Jim, we'll get back to him in Wrightsville Beach. Also, Jill Brown is from Hurricane Fran, in the eye of Hurricane Fran, near Bolivia, North Carolina, and that is in Brunswick County, southeast of Wilmington. We mentioned Wilmington has not had a direct hit since 1954. What were some of the, if you remember back to 1954 with Hazel, some of the cleanup and some of the destruction that occurred in that area, because Wilmington is not right on the beach?
Well, there was just tremendous devastation throughout the whole area. The beach communities were pretty well wiped out. Most of the boating piers along that whole stretch were wiped out, and the damage was very, very serious. Now, Hazel rather, was moving very rapidly. It was moving probably 50 miles an hour after it got out of North Carolina, so the rain wasn't that much of a problem down there, even though by the time it got up into Canada, up into Ontario, they had tremendous amounts of rain there. But Hazel rather, was maintained its strength all up through the mid-Atlantic states. I don't think they ever had a stronger hurricane, for example, go up through the middle of Pennsylvania. There was enormous damage up there in the woods and so on, and this is because it was moving very rapidly.
Well, I know growing up in Maryland, my parents often talk about Hurricane Hazel around the Ocean City area and Salisbury area, because it was hit pretty hard, even back inland by 30 miles.
And Washington, D.C. was hit hard, too. Yeah.
Okay, now let's go back to the satellite loop. We'll show you where the eye of Hurricane Fran is right now, and we've got an update from Wilmington, and as of 9:34, the winds now have dropped off. 9 o'clock, the winds were east at 58 miles an hour, John, gust to 86, and as of 9:34, which was about 7 minutes ago, 9:34 Eastern Time, the winds have dropped off from 58 to 27. So obviously the eye wall may be drawing closer to the city of Wilmington.
But it appears, though, that the wind is shifting into southeast, that they may be right on the edge of the eye wall. It's not clear that they'll get entirely in the eye, since they're still gusting to 48 miles an hour and the wind is shifted to southeast. That tells us that the eye is off just to the west of Wilmington.
And you can see where I've circled, you can see that white dot now on shore. Jill Brown is in that area in Bolivia, North Carolina, in the eye. And Raleigh-Durham now, that's back in the interior. That's back here in the Triad area. You can see the brighter colors here in the infrared picture, the reds and oranges, indicating the higher or colder cloud tops. And we are talking about some heavy rain there. And John, the winds have gusted there pretty significantly already, too.
Already to 41 miles an hour, and the strongest winds are not up there yet.
And likely with those high winds in Raleigh and the Durham area, Chapel Hill, through the Rocky Mount area and Goldsboro and up towards Roxborough and Oxford, you're probably going to have some of the same problems those of us experienced here in Atlanta last year with Hurricane Opal. High winds blowing down trees and power outages, the big problem. Also, the likelihood as you move north and west of Raleigh-Durham over towards the hilly areas and certainly into the mountainous areas of western North Carolina and up through the Shenandoah Valley, Virginia, just a lot of rainfall and a lot of flooding.
Well, we hope it won't be too bad, but we're very apprehensive about that.
Okay, let's take a quick look at the radar. We'll get once again Matt Crowther to get the radar loaded up here and take a look again at the intensity of the hurricane, Hurricane Fran, making landfall just in the past hour. If you're just tuning in, you're watching the Weather Channel as we continue our Hurricane Fran coverage, making landfall south of Wilmington around the Cape Fear area, and now the eye is on shore. Sustained winds 115 miles an hour. We've had reports of gusts to as high as 124 miles an hour. Rainfall at 1 inch an hour already in Wilmington, almost 4 inches now, over 4 inches of rain with Hurricane Fran. And we still don't have any reports, certainly, of storm surge, because obviously the beaches were cleared well in advance of Hurricane Fran. A Category 3, not as dangerous as Hugo, which was a Category 4, which hammered Charleston and the Isle of Palms and those areas back in the third week of September back in 1989, with winds sustained, I believe, John, sustained winds when Hugo made landfall, correct me if I'm wrong, 140 miles an hour.
It was about 140, 135 or 140. It was a Category 4.
And we're certainly going to be watching Fran very closely, because once it makes landfall, we're going to have to deal with not only the heavy rainfalls, the risk of some tornadoes, and the accompanying flooding we've been talking about all evening long.
That's right, and of course, as we have been saying all evening, by tomorrow, the ongoing story will be, well, of course, the story will be the damage done by Fran on the coast, but the ongoing story will be the heavy rain inland.
And once again, let's go back to the latest with Hurricane Fran. This is a 9 o'clock update. We haven't shown you this in a while. We wanted to get it out to you because I know a lot of you are watching with your hurricane tracking charts across the country and down through the Caribbean. This is Fran's coordinates as of 9 from the National Hurricane Center, 33.9 north, 78.0 west. And that puts it at 25 miles south-southwest of Wilmington, North Carolina. Winds now are down to 105 miles an hour, so I need to update that. I had just said 115. I apologize. 105 miles an hour. Now moving north at 16, John, and the pressure 956. We'll have another update, though, in about 15 minutes around 10.
We might point out to the viewers that now straight north, not northwest as it was.
So that could bring the center at least up over or just to the west of Wilmington itself.
I think it's very close. The very fact that Wilmington has shifted into southeast and is still windy enough makes me think that they might not quite get in the eye of Wilmington or Wrightsville Beach.
Right, that's right, and that's where Jim Cantore is. We're going to be going to Jim Cantore very shortly. We're having some problems tonight, obviously because of the onshore Hurricane Fran in North Carolina. A lot of wind has precluded us from getting out a picture, at least from Wrightsville Beach and Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach, a totally different situation. I think a lot of people in South Carolina were very concerned yesterday because a lot of people were around just 7 years ago with Hugo, and they remembered how Hugo was, and they certainly took the warnings very seriously.
Well, I'm sure they were very concerned. We were very concerned for South Carolina at this time yesterday.
That's true, and fortunately Charleston has dodged the bullet with an offshore. Very much so. Yeah. Even Myrtle Beach, we were talking to Jeff Morrow just in the past hour. You've had a lot of wind. In case you have beachfront property there, you're going to be in pretty good shape. The water has been lapping at the sand dunes, but that is it. Once again, the lucky thing here is the tide has been going out. And he saw a little bit of damage, but other than some wind damage, I think a lot of you are going to be happy when you get back to the beaches if you have beachfront property that you're going to be okay anywhere east of Highway 17. At least nothing serious to report at this point there in South Carolina. Totally different story though up the coast.
Right. I'm sure that they won't have any tidal flooding there at all.
Yeah, with the wind blowing offshore. Right. But in North Carolina, Fran has made landfall now near Cape Fear around the Southport area. We had an amateur radio operator a couple of hours ago reporting a wind gust to 124 miles an hour as the hurricane hit over around the Southport area. And then really, I think some of the hardest hit places, John, are going to be Curry Beach, Carolina Beach, and up towards Wrightsville Beach. Those barrier islands, much like we saw with Hurricane Opal in the areas in the Florida Panhandle, we had to deal with a lot of damage. Some of those beaches were closed for a couple months to the public over well to the east, though, fortunately, of Gulf Shores, but over in the Panhandle of Florida. And I think tomorrow, once we hit first light, we're going to see probably some pictures that we don't really want to see, but are probably going to be likely once we get this storm through the area.
Right along the South Carolina border there, up around North Myrtle Beach, I would be anxious to see how they make out. But the cities, as you point out, Seaside, just to the west, Ocean Isle Beach, Holden Beach, I think very hard hit.
Okay, John, we're going to take a break from our continuing live coverage. Once again, we have Jill Brown in the eye of Hurricane Fran. We're going to try to go back to her in about 10 minutes at 10 Eastern, 9 Central, and also Jeff Moore, Myrtle Beach, Wrightsville Beach, Jim Cantore. We're going to take a...
In the southeastern part of North Carolina. The storm surge, once again, is like raising the water level this much above normal. So if you're at high tide and you raise it 8 or 12 feet, that can be pretty bad, and quite a bit of flooding can occur. Now, the good news is our hurricane's making landfall, but it's not high tide right now. It'll be high tide 2 or 3 in the morning. That's when we could see some problems up here in some of the outer banks of North Carolina, so have that in mind. Let's go to the radar here. Once again, a different look at what's happening. Our hurricane coming on into the Wilmington area. Just south of there, Jill Brown has been in the eye of the storm, and she will be reporting hopefully at the top of the hour. All this rain is coming in, and that's going to be a real problem even down the road. Raleigh-Durham, up into the Appalachians, West Virginia even this weekend. As we go through Friday and Saturday, there's going to be a tremendous amount of rainfall. So far, 3 to 8 inches of rain have fallen, and that's going to be the story through tomorrow night. A lot of flooding. And keep in mind that the trees are sitting in a very saturated soil. So these 70, 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts coming into the interior of the Carolinas could topple a lot of trees, and we could have a lot of power outages, so just plan on the power being out for a while here as the hurricane makes its way on in. Now, certainly the hurricane will weaken, but the flooding is going to be the big problem as the winds start to come down. The forecasted precipitation, 10 inches or more, and this is not an exaggeration because we have the Appalachian Mountains here, and that's going to help squeeze out even more moisture. A foot of rain in some of these mountainous terrain would not be out of the question. Incredible flooding. Well, as that's not the only thing going on, we want to tell you folks here in the islands we have tropical depression number 8, which could become our next tropical storm. It's moving off to the west here toward the islands, and we'll have to watch closely to see if that does become our next tropical storm, which would be Hortense over the next couple of days. Our main concern tonight, though, is Fran. Let's take a quick check of the forecast here, take you through the next 24 hours or so, and Friday morning we have a tropical storm, which means the winds are dying down, probably 50, 60 miles per hour, something like that. There could be some higher gusts, and there still could be some tornadoes. We haven't had any reports of tornadoes yet, but there certainly could be, especially during the day tomorrow with the heating of the day. And look at that rainfall once again coming down. A quick check of the temps. Cool in the west for you folks here, but the east is going to be soaked right through the weekend. Temperatures in the 80s and 90s, and it's going to be a soaker right up into New York City and Boston. The rain will pivot on up to the north, and we're going to have a wet weekend. And stay tuned. I think now we're going to go back to the update desk with Mike Seidel and John Hope.
How can the Home Depot's How-To Clinics help you?
If you are where you are now, you'll have to stay there probably because the conditions have really worsened here. The winds 50 to, as I said, up to 100 miles per hour if possible. The flood watches are posted. Heavy rain has already come down in some areas, and it'll be coming down all night long. Relentless rain on top of already saturated soil, and that will mean flooding problems. It will mean the trees can topple easier with the wind gusts, and to make matters worse, we could have severe weather. A couple of areas here in North Carolina, we have a tornado watch. Oftentimes when hurricanes make landfall, they can produce tornadoes, and this could be the case. Now, we haven't seen any yet, but some of the outer bands of precipitation far from the eye will make the tornadoes possibly. And out to the west, we have a severe